My name is Chris, and today we're going to look at the Goldring E3 turntable cartridge. Welcome to the Vinyl Attack. As this channel continues to grow, I am able to meet more and more excellent people in the hi-fi world, both distributor and consumer alike. When Nick Renshaw reached out to me after speaking with Ron Burnett over at New Record Day about my flooded basement to see if he could help in any way, I knew immediately that he was one of those people. His gracious offer to help rebuild notwithstanding, it was that he first offered this help before asking if I'd like to do a product review that really caught my attention. Thankfully, I didn't lose much gear in the flood, even though everything else took a hit, so I took a pass on the aid, but I did express my interest in a product review right away. Some of the brands under his purview include Q Acoustics, Grado, iFi, and Goldring. It was this last brand we settled upon with which to start, and he quickly dispatched the $170 E3 cartridge from across the Atlantic in the UK from where they're based. If you're not familiar with Goldring or their extensive heritage in the field, while you take a look at these technical nerd specs about the E3, I'll explain a little bit about who they are. Goldring has been around for over 100 years and started making gramophone needles. Along the way, they innovated an electro soundbox and an electro gramophone pickup, helping to pave the way for moving Magic cartridges, of which they've had several unique designs themselves. Flash forward to today, and the E3 is the figurehead in their E-Series entry line of cartridges. Taking the vast information gathered over the past 100 years and their impressive catalog of cartridges, including options in moving magnet, moving iron, and moving coil, the E3 uses what they call magnetic duplex technology. What does this mean? Well, the cutting head of the lathe used to make masters on vinyl uses a 45-degree dual coil configuration to cut grooves that are not only horizontal, but vertical as well. This dual coil setup allows for precise movement and creation of information and also allows for more music details to exist in the grooves. The magnetic duplex technology aims to mimic this motion with its dual magnetic mount, allowing the stylus to more closely follow the intended grooves left behind from the original cut master. The utilization of two low-mass magnets in this way is said to be superior to the single, heavier-mass magnet of a regular cartridge, allowing for better stereo separation and accuracy. But is this the case? I grabbed a few records and spent some time with the E3 on my setup to answer just that. Whenever I'm listening to a cart different from my own, whether for an in-home audition for purchase or for review purposes regarding the channel, I tend to keep my setup mostly the same. I don't mix up speakers or amps much, and I stick with my EAT E-Glow Petite most of the time so I can hear what a cartridge is bringing to the system I already know. I realize many of you would like to know how the E3 sounds on more affordable systems as well, so I do a small amount of that to check balance, but the overall gathering of information here is done on my normal home setup as I'm looking for the cart's ability to read information and reproduce it. I've found that this method serves me best. Picking up the latest reissue of Skid Row's seminal self-titled first album, I was hoping to hear a sonic piece that would bring me back to my youth, rocking out with long hair and not a care in the world. And while I think the E3 did a fine job of presenting male vocal presence, biting and clean guitars alike, and drum detail, I realized after a very short time that the weakness in sonics I was hearing wasn't in the E3, but rather in this crappy pressing of the album. So, I did what any self-respecting person in this situation would do, and I scrapped Skid Row in exchange for Rush's fantastic re-release of Permanent Waves. Once that issue was out of the way, I could hear much more clearly that the vocals were right on top of the mix where they should be, but blending well with the heavily stereo-separated flanger-induced guitars of Alex Lifeson. The notes were clear and felt accurate, and was easy to hear chords ring out without sounding busy or muddled. Geddy's bass was well-balanced, present, but not overwhelming, which has always been a Rush staple, and I found it to be in good form here. Of particular note was the bass detail and grit on Free Will. It shined when Alex's guitars weren't quite as busy on a passage, yet remained perfectly audible underneath said guitars even when the wide soundstage guitar lead happens in the middle of the song. Almost as integral to me as the vocals are the ever-so-important ride cymbal of Neil Peart.
I told you not to eat Mr. Peart's sandwich.
It's just Peart.
You sure that it's not Peart?
Yes, I've been made aware that he pronounced it differently, but after nearly 40 years of saying it one way, I'm just not going to change now. The Canadians in the audience may fire when ready. All that aside, Neil had a ride cymbal pattern that every drummer in the world is keenly aware of, and I'm sure you know it too, even if you don't think you do. Simply listen to the Spirit of Radio for just one of several wonderful examples of this, and you'll see what I mean. I was happy to hear it ringing clear and true here, along with the powerful sonics and his pounding drum kit throughout. From there, I changed it up a bit as I'm wont to do to make sure that I'm checking all of the boxes and put on the latest Blue Note Tone Poet reissue of Sonny Clark's My Conception, an absolute gem of a recording and pressing with exemplar performances by all-time jazz heroes like Donald Byrd, Hank Mobley, Paul Chambers, and the one and only Art Blakey. Immediately, you'll be engaged with how lively and full the horns sound. The detail and balance of the saxophone is warm and lush, while the brilliant bite of the trumpet is particularly alive. Every instrument was easy to identify in its place with the soundstage, and the mix was fantastic. Yes, you could say that this comes down to the quality of the recording and a superb remastering by Kevin Gray, but knowing my system the way that I do, a low-quality cartridge here would certainly have had a poor showing, and I wouldn't have heard these details. The tom hits on the drum kit were very accurate, and it really showed the tone of the kit and how overall sound of drums were different in that era. On the first track, Junka, you could hear quite clearly how the air between the hi-hat cymbals was escaping, offering up its unmistakable sound as Art kept time with his left foot on the hi-hat stand. While the piano was detailed, I'd say the E3 might not be the last word in accuracy here. Keep in mind, though, that it has been said before that pianos are one of the hardest instruments to reproduce accurately, and the E3 is certainly no slouch. I enjoyed every note played and found it to suit the overall feel of the album superbly. A particular section of note for me was the bass solo in this piece. Paul Chambers, in his tragically short career, laid down some of the best jazz bass lines you'll ever hear. In this instance, rather than going for the traditional dog-walking style and finger-picked and slap bass, he played with a bow. The texture of this bass was so detailed that I played it back several times just to enjoy it again and again. The final record in this testing lineup was the soundtrack to a movie that shaped my youth, a little story about Neo-Tokyo called Akira. This movie was groundbreaking at every turn, from its amazing source material, the now benchmark-setting animation, and certainly, not least of all, its score. While I could spend all day talking about the musical collective known as Gaino Yamashiro Gumi, founded by Tsutomu Ohashi, I'll simply say that their work in the 1980s, blending various traditional styles of music with the, at the time, state-of-the-art synthesizers and MIDI work, was nothing less than innovative. This album boasts a mix of synthesizers, Indonesian bamboo percussion, traditional Japanese theatrical and spiritual music, European classical, and prog rock of all things. Its sonic signature is one of the most recognizable of any movie, animated or not, and it was the perfect test for the stereo separation claims made by the E3. After jumping in with the harsh-sounding explosion effects from the movie, the music in the first composition, Kaneda, comes in with fantastic presence. The percussive instruments were well placed, well balanced, and never overpower the choral vocals. The bass notes were deep and full with intelligible tone. All of the exotic instruments sounded as accurate as I imagined they would with my lack of experience hearing them in person. The difference between those and the synthesized parts were obvious, but in a way that made sense, as the two were meant to be played off of each other to begin with. The track Tetsuo had big, booming drums and much more delicate bells at the same time, which isn't what I would call normal on a standard piece of music you'd hear on the radio today. Yet the E3 was able to reproduce all of these sounds and not lose focus. Was their claim of stereo separation accurate? Yeah, I'd say so, as I heard a wonderful soundstage with all the bells and tones in this melodic passage. But, for all it's good, no product can do everything we want, so what did I find lacking with this cartridge? Well, to start with, the magnetic duplex technology featured in the E3 seems to make it a bit lower output than other carts I've used at this price range. While this isn't inherently bad, you may consider bumping up the decibels on your Phono preamp a little, or running it with a stereo that has plenty of oomph to give you the volume that you might want. I'd also say that if you have a turntable with adjustable VTA, this is more for you, as the size of the body is fairly tall. You may consider raising the tracking to compensate for what I found to be a little bit of bloom in the upper mid-range. Lastly, for my opinion anyway, the shape can be a slight deterrent when dropping the needle. Its bulkier look hides the stylus fairly well underneath, so you'll want to take care when placing it on a record for play. But with those things aside, I would say that for about $170, if you're in the market for a moving magnet cartridge that tracks well, has excellent stereo separation, quality, detail, and fine soundstage, the Goldring E3 is certainly worth putting on your short list. If you have any experience with this cart, or you've been thinking about it, or have questions about it, I'd love to hear about it in the comments section below. If you haven't already for some strange reason, do consider subscribing to the channel and liking this video, as it helps me determine the kind of content that you enjoy, and I look forward to next time.